Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, and it's a one-man mailbag. That's right. You guys, I think, broke the all-time record. I don't have an exact number, but it's definitely a record. The most emails we've ever gotten in a given month, and I really appreciate that, and also apologize to those of you who sent emails that I didn't get to this month. I'm going to get through as many as I can today. A lot of great questions from you guys, and it's a fun time of year. I did want to start, though, with a couple of reactions from the combine. And Ryan sent the tweet, has your view changed on the 2026 class after the combine? And maybe a little bit, but not in a way that it's really going to matter that much in a couple of months, if that makes sense. Like, we're working on limited information right now, so we'll take all the information that we can get. There are a few guys who went up, a few guys who went down. That being said, if NFL draft capital disagrees with what we just saw at the combine, then I may not care as much about those combine performances. Mike Washington, I thought, was the big winner, partially because, like we talked about last week, there was not a clear RB2 in this class, and the gap between RB1 and RB2 was really huge. I think as of right now, you probably put Mike Washington with his absolutely incredible size speed score as RB2 in the class. It's still hard to get excited about him in round one just because the production was so unimpressive from Washington. So he's probably going to be around pick 10 or 11. One of the guys who was in that range that becomes more of a loser is I think every other running back in this class wasn't that excited about Emmett, wasn't that excited about Price. We'll see. There will be a few of these guys that get drafted on day two, and they will be in consideration at the round one, round two turn. But Washington was probably the big winner from the class. I think also it just, based on the rumor mills, it seems more and more like Ty Simpson will be a round one pick in NFL drafts, which means he will be a round one pick in rookie superflex drafts. And then Kenyon Sadiq. Listen, we've talked about this for a couple of weeks. He was supposed to go to the combine and look like this incredible athlete. Athleticism matters as much at tight end as it does for any skill position. He has it. So he's solidified himself as a top 10 pick, perhaps as early as a top 6 pick. Those were kind of my big winners. Ryan sent a tweet to kick off the losers. How worried should we be about Scattaboo? Considering all the Ken Walker and Giants chatter, he's my number 3 RB. You know, it wasn't just free agent chatter. It was also Jeremiah Love chatter. And I think for at least the time being, this is another one of those situations where the winners and losers from this week were maybe more temporary winners and losers until we see if it validates with what happens in the next 2 months. But I think if you have Cam Scattaboo right now, there's no question you have to feel worse than if you did a month ago. Looking at my dynasty rankings, I haven't really dropped him that much. He is currently my RB 17. I think comparing him to an RJ Harvey, which Harvey didn't get great news with the news that the Broncos were trying to get on the David Montgomery sweepstakes, and now maybe adding another running back, which we kind of thought they would. I think it's possible that ETN or Kenneth Walker move ahead of Scattaboo with the right contract and landing spot. He looked so awesome last year, but it's something we've talked about a lot. It's a late running back selection. It's a new coaching staff. They seem to have a priority right now, according to the reports at least, of adding another running back. I think you have to feel nervous about Cam Scattaboo. Let's get to some emails. Crosby sent us one. He's in a Superflex tight end premium 12-team league. Another manager suggested he would give me Trevor Lawrence and picks for Jayden Daniels. Is this the right move since injury could be a concern for Jayden and how Trevor's style of play could have him play till he's older? Or should I stick it out? If moving on can be the right move, what pick or picks would make you slam accept? And I think you got to the heart of the question. Is this a good idea? Is entirely dependent on what is the pick that's being offered. As of right now in my Superflex trade chart, I still have Jayden Daniels worth 45 points. Trevor Lawrence is worth 31. If you're looking at a player in that 14-point range that would make up that difference, I think it's really close to a mid first round pick. So if I could, and definitely I'd be okay if I thought I had a chance of having a good 2027 pick of making that range. But I think if you're talking about a top 5 2026 pick, that would be a slam dunk accept from me. I would give up Daniels, take Lawrence and the top 5 pick. If it was the 6th or 7th or 8th pick, I'm probably trying to get another second thrown in on that. I wouldn't take a 2026 pick that's late in this draft. And I would consider a 2027 pick as long as I didn't think it was guaranteed to be one of those late picks. Connor sent a message in, longtime listener, first time emailer. Thank you, Connor. Thanks for all the great work you do with the show. I have the 101 in a Dynasty Superflex full PPR tight end premium draft starting this Friday. I also have Josh Allen in my other Dynasty league. Should I just go ahead and go all in and get Allen on both teams, or should I accept an offer to trade down to 108 for an additional 6th round pick? When I first heard that, I thought, man, a 6th round pick is not enough to go from 1 to 8. And I'm not sure that initial thought is entirely true when you're thinking about a startup. I have pick 8 is probably going to be Bijan Robinson, Jamar Chase, Caleb Williams, somewhere in that range, which is worth about 8 points on my trade chart less than pick number 1. In a super flex league, the 80th pick, you're looking at probably an RJ Harvey, maybe a Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne, Harold Fannin in that range. Those guys are all worth more than 8 points on the trade chart. I think it really comes down to, and this is more of a personal preference, how you feel about diversifying your dynasty rosters. If I only had 2 leagues, I'm not sure that I'd want to have that much investment in one player. At the same time, he's the consensus best player in Dynasty Superflex leagues, and you'd have him on both rosters, so that's pretty awesome. It's more of a personal preference question. I might see if I could get that 6th round pick to turn into a 5th round pick, because obviously there's a pretty big incentive for the guy to go get Josh Allen. If you could do that, then I would make the deal. But I thought it was a good exercise in remembering that, like, when you're talking about a startup draft, around 5 round 6 pick, just picking it up for nothing is extremely valuable. Greg sent in a message. He's got 2 leagues, and yeah, I'm going to answer both of his questions. Both leagues, PPR, Superflex Dynasty leagues, both teams he did well last year. He won the League 1. He won it in 2024, finished second, lost in the semifinals last year, being offered Amon-Ra St. Brown for a 2027 first and Braylon Allen. Now, that on its face seems like, yes, he has 3 27 first round picks. One could be the 101. One should be late. The other one's likely middle. He won't trade the 101. Would you trade another of my first round picks and Allen for St. Brown? Absolutely, yes. I'd really try to get that one that's your own. You might have to throw a second on that. That's probably worth it. The problem with likely be a mid to late round first for the 3rd pick, because I agree with you. I wouldn't trade the one that I thought might be the 101. But the one that might be a mid to late first round pick, that might just be a couple of injuries away from turning into a really good pick. So see if you can maybe turn your 2027 first, and I'd throw in your 2027 or 2026 second maybe, and try to get that done. In League 2, he also finished second in the standings. He's being offered CD Lamb for Scattaboo and a 2027 first. I mean, everybody's trying to trade these wide receivers for 2027 first, huh? Again, if you finished second last year and you made the semifinals and almost led the league in points, and we're talking about how Cam Scattaboo's value is going down, trading your own first and Scattaboo for Lamb, yeah, I think we could absolutely get something like that done. I see a couple of questions coming into the chat, one about RJ Harvey, one about Jonathan Taylor. I already marked those to read at the end of the show. If you guys have more questions, go ahead and try to get them in the chat here before we get to probably be around the 25-minute mark when we start getting to your questions. Chance sent in an email. I have to start by saying I love the show and the variety of guests you bring on. That's a great way to get your question read, Chance. I now have to burn it. I have burnt it down to the Nubs rebuild team. My last older assets are Christian Watson, Tyler Algier, and Juwan Johnson. I don't have much for younger guys worth anything. What's the better strategy to handle this level of player? I love it. I get messages from teams that have been dominating their leagues and then messages at this stage. And the truth is, because I'm a nut job and I love dynasty fantasy football, I enjoy being in both of these places. He does have 102, 107, 3 seconds, 6 2027 firsts, 4 2027 seconds. So he's got the draft capital. Really just wanting to know, when you have a few players like Watson, Algier, and Johnson, do you try to consolidate those and get one single good asset, or try to just sell them for nickels and hope one of those turns into a quarter? I would say with you having the 107 this year and us seeing such a big difference between 105 and 107, I would see if any combination of those players could get you up into the top 5 this year. As far as Algier goes, I think right now, based on where his value is, the best thought is to try to hold on to Tyler Algier and hope that he is someone who looks like he might be a starting running back in a couple of months. Maybe even that period of time between free agency and the NFL draft. If he lands in a good spot, that might be the best time to trade Algier. Juwan Johnson seems like the kind of guy that this time of year, most people aren't thinking about valuing at all. When he starts scoring points, he'll have more value during the season. I might hold on to him until the season. You run a little risk of something going wrong. For the most part, I think you're going to get more for him in season. And Christian Watson, you're just trying to speculate on a believer. I think Christian Watson might be a good sell right now. So I'd probably see if I could use Watson to get from 107 to 105 or 104. Assuming you can't, see if including Algier or Johnson would help you in that pursuit. Other than that, I might just be looking to sell Watson now for what I can, and then the other guys when their value peaks. Paul sent in a message. He's a new listener, has a follow-up on our How to Set Up a Fantasy League episode. Go check that out with John Bosch from about a month ago if you missed it. He does a fantastic job kind of walking through the process of how to set up a new league. He's starting a new started with best ball lineups. It's everyone's first dynasty league, and they want to keep it to 8 or 10 teams. He wanted to know how large the rosters should be. So first he asked how many total players should be on an active roster in general. I think if you were looking at it, I don't like to have less than 20 players rostered in a 12-team league. So that's a total of 240. So if you go with 10 teams, maybe you say 24 is a minimum for the size of the roster. If you go with 8 teams, maybe you say 30. He also asked how many starting positions per team in an 8-man league. I would suggest going with a lot of extra flexes. So maybe a quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, a super flex, of course, and then somewhere in the vicinity of 3 to 5 flexes. And if you go tight end premium, that makes it a little bit easier. But the one of the things, and it is best ball, so that helps a lot. But in those 8-team leagues, everybody's going to have so many good players. You want to be able to truly show the strength of an overall roster, which does mean more starting spots. We got one more email here from Bryce before we take our first break. He's a longtime fan of the FFT podcast. They're the reason he started to play Dynasty. He says he's really struggling with something that I think is common. Having a difficult time evaluating players and draft picks and the trade calculators that can vary drastically. So he's in a rebuild period. He sold some older talent for draft picks last year, has the 101 and the 102 in the 2026 draft, as well as 2 first-rounders in 2027. He was trying to figure out if he's planning on taking Jeremiah Love at 101, and he wasn't sure if he should take Mendoza or one of the top 3 wide receivers at 102. And then he also received a trade offer for 101, and that was Jalen Waddle, Woody Marks, and a 2027 first. Woody Marks, another guy who lost at least a little bit of value with the Texans' significant acquisition of David Montgomery. So Waddle, Marks, and a 2027 first for the 101, and he thinks that will be likely in the middle. He knows it's supposed to be a better draft. He's trying to figure out the thought process of how you'd handle the situation. He'd love to trade 102 instead of 101, but they're not interested in that. So I would probably take Jeremiah Love and Fernando Mendoza. I think we've talked a lot about the importance of quarterbacks and the fact that they hold their value. And if you're at the beginning of a rebuild, or even halfway through a rebuild, those are the safest assets to have on your dynasty roster. As far as the Waddle marks in a 2027 first, I don't think that's quite enough for me. It wouldn't have been enough even before Montgomery went to the Texans. If you could squeeze some more value out of that, but honestly, it might have to be something like getting rid of Marks and adding another first. And if he's not going to do that, then I'd just go ahead and take Love. It may be that his value even goes up even more if he starts off better than Ashton Genty did. Let's take our first break. When we come back, we got a few more emails. We've got some tweets, and we'll get to some of your chat questions.
This is why we do this every March.
Major slam!
It is a basketball party.
It's March! Expect the unexpected!
We are back. Andrew sends in an email. I finished 8th this past season, but acquired a number of firsts and some talented cornerstones. Can I realistically compete next season, or am I looking at a long rebuild? And he sends me the roster. It's Burrow and Jayden Daniels and Tua. So he's got 2 quarterbacks. Travion, Dylan Sampson, Michael Carter. He does not have 2 running backs. Jamar Chase, Michael Pittman, Jordan Addison, Xavier Worthy, Christian Watson. Doesn't necessarily look like he for sure has 2 starting wide receivers. Tucker Kraft, Hunter Henry, David Njoku, Mason Taylor. So we're good at tight end. We're good at starting quarterback. And we have a wide receiver 1. Now he holds the 105, the 106, the 108, and no second rounders this year. Key point of context, this is a 10-team super flex full PPR league. You do have to have a truly awesome team to be a contender in a 10-team league. I wouldn't say, Andrew, at this point that you necessarily have that. He's trying to figure out what direction to go here. I think the first pick at 105 is easy. You're taking probably Jordan Taysom, but whichever of the 3 wide receivers is left. I would anticipate it could be Lemon, it could be Tate, could be Tyson. You take one of those guys. I'd probably be trying to see if I could turn 106 and 108 into a top 4 pick and just take another one of those wide receivers and look at 2027 probably being the contending window. The other thing you could do is you take one of those wide receivers at 105 and then see what you can do in terms of turning 106 and 108 into running backs. There are going to be some people that are excited about that second tier of wide receivers. There's going to be some people that don't have a tight end like you do with Tucker Kraft and try to go get Sadiq. And so if you can use that type of value to turn 106 and 108 into a wide receiver 2 and an RB1, then I think go for it. But if you're not able to do that, then I'd be trying to turn 106 and 108 into a top 4 pick and just take 2 of those elite wide receiver prospects. Then you're kind of in a situation where, and we talk about this a lot, you build your running backs at the end. You'd have running back, you'd have wide receiver, you'd have tight end, you'd have Travion. Now we got to go find some running backs. That's easier to do in season. You might even be able to turn a 2027 second into someone like a DeAndre Swift. And so going about it that way will be better for the long-term future, I think. Dave finished this season in 3rd in non-super flex, non-tight end premium, half PPR, 2 wide receiver dynasty league. Current starters are JJ McCarthy, Sam Darnold, Jacoby Brissett, and Justin Fields. Just offered Lamar Jackson for my 2028 first and DeAndre Swift. Should I take this deal? Seems like a no-brainer. And I would agree. Even in 1 QB, to be able to lock Lamar Jackson down for a rookie pick that's not going to be used at least until 2 years from now, that value will go up eventually, but I think you're getting a pretty good value on it right now. If you can add Lamar Jackson to a team that finished 3rd with that collection of quarterbacks, I'd try to go win a ring. Rich says, love your show. I wouldn't have Harold Fannin if it wasn't for you. My team is loaded at receiver: Lamb, Rashee Rice, Nico Collins, Luther Burden, DJ Moore, Travis Hunter. I also have the 102, the 202, the 208. I need a number 1 running back. What are your thoughts about how to do this? What would you offer to move from the 102 to the 101? Or what would be a reasonable offer for Gibbs or Bijan Robinson? I think it should be cheaper to get the 101 than it should be to get Gibbs or Robinson. And so you don't know how anybody's valuing Rashee Rice. We have another question a little bit later in the show about how to get rid of Rashee Rice. I think if you're in this situation with a really nice receiving core, you might see, will he add anything to the 101 if you give him Rashee Rice and the 102? I'm not sure that he will. Some people won't, but that would be, I would want something back. And so what can you do there? Also, you've got those 3 second-round picks. Does he value those at all? Can that help you get closer? Maybe you can give him the 102, the 202, the 208, and one of those lesser wide receivers. I'd be willing to do that as well. I think there's some creative ways you can go about getting to Love. I think it's going to be, if you're going to go get Gibbs or Robinson, you may have to give up CeeDee Lamb or Nico Collins, and then you're kind of just making wide receiver worse to make running back better. So I'd see if Rashee Rice moves the needle. I'd see if those seconds can get you closer to just giving a lesser player for the 101. Maybe it's somebody that really wants Mendoza, and so it works out for both of you. We did have a few tweets before we get to your chats. If you're looking to rid your hands of Rashee Rice, what's the lowest tier of wide receivers you would do 1 for 1? I think it will be difficult to do a 1 for 1 dynasty trade for Rice unless someone's just trying to bet on buying the dip. I don't actually have a huge dip at this point. He is currently my wide receiver 12. Looking at the tiers, he's really in the same tier with guys all the way down to wide receiver 18. So if you look at those guys, it's Rashee Rice. I think there's some Emeka Egbuka, Luther Burden, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. I think there's a couple of guys in that group for me that other people are down on. So a Marvin Harrison Jr., a Brian Thomas Jr., you might actually be able to get those guys plus a little bit. And if you could do that, I'd be happy to do it. If you wanted to go down a little bit further, Zay Flowers, I could understand that move. The upside's not as high, although I think the upside's higher than what we've seen from Zay Flowers. Ladd McConkey coming off a down year might be a way to get away from Rashee Rice. The answer is really, how desperate are you to get away from him? I think Flowers and McConkey probably represent the very end of how desperate I might get. You guys have given me a hard time a lot on this show about how I'm too low on Rashee Rice. So you probably won't be surprised to know that I don't think I have any Rashee Rice in Dynasty, and that feels okay right now. Reese has a question about Breece. How do we view Breece if he gets tagged? Well, Reese, you sent this. I saw this last night, and this morning it sounds like he did. So Breece Hall, they're trying to work out a long-term deal to keep him with the Jets. I wish they'd just work out a trade to send him anywhere else. But he is currently my RB10. Again, in a tier with Quinshon Judkins, Kyron Williams, Bucky Irving, and Chase Brown. I think for somebody who is a true contender, they could move him for a couple of guys. I have one tier lower in Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley, and maybe pick up something along with that deal, maybe even be better in 2026. I view Hall as kind of a mid-range RB2 going into this year. I'll probably feel better about him if he stays on the franchise tag, but the downside of that we can't ignore is that when you're on the franchise tag, you have no guarantee for next year. And so a significant injury could really hamper his long-term value. Still, I think the upside exists for him to be a top 5 running back. And who knows, maybe the Jets offensive line will be better this year. Maybe they'll get a veteran quarterback that throws to the running back more. It's a lot of maybes, but I'm still viewing him as a borderline RB1. Trevor asks, what's a reasonable return for trading away 2 second-round picks? Well, I think as one of the questions earlier referenced, there's such an enormous range of value on trade calculators, and that includes for second-round picks as well. So it'll depend on who you're dealing with. But I think the 2 second-round picks is a pretty standard cost for a good number 2 running back or wide receiver that is not necessarily young and doesn't necessarily have top 10 upside, but everybody feels pretty confident about them as a number 2 at their position. So I don't know. It may depend on what kind of contract he gets, whether you can get Travis Etienne for that type of price. The level of wide receiver right below Zay Flowers and Ladd McConkey, I think you could be looking for. And then the other thing is you may be able to get, especially if you're looking at long term, maybe a future first. But most likely, the reasonable return for trading away 2 seconds is to move up within the second round, or maybe get to pick 11 or 12 this year, or to get kind of a middling RB2 or wide receiver 2 that has a better floor than they do an upside. And again, probably somebody you're looking at that's 26 or older. A couple questions I saw in the chat earlier, and then we'll get to the rest of as many as I can get to today. The voice may run out at any moment. Nick says, that's not Nick, that's Mick. Sorry, Mick. Love the Dynasty show. Do you think we should be trying to sell Harvey right now for something like the 26 109? 109 sounds a little bit cheap to me. I referenced Harvey earlier when I was talking about Cam Scadaboo. Harvey's currently my RB 18. I do expect Denver to add someone else. I'm not sure that he's ever a true feature back in the NFL, but he does have the type of big playability and upside that he could have a season or maybe even 2 where he finishes as a borderline RB1 just based on efficiency, not based on volume. If I was going to trade RJ Harvey, I'd probably try to do something more similar to like, can I turn RJ Harvey and a second into the 105? I might, if there was somebody I really liked there at 106. I would be interested in trading him for a 2027 first on the team that I wasn't sure was going to be good. So I think thinking about getting off of him probably worked better before the Montgomery reports, but there's a lot of people that didn't pay any attention to that. Thinking about getting off of him makes sense. I don't think he's probably going to be a feature back. I do think he's a pretty solid RB2 for dynasty purposes. Another question from Sebastian. How are you thinking about Jonathan Taylor versus Jefferson this year? I have Taylor, but have a 1-for-1 offer for Jefferson. I feel like I need more given his QB situation. Thank you for all that you do. So I'm going to pull up the trade chart here, and Jonathan Taylor and Justin Jefferson are very, very close on my trade chart. I do currently have Jefferson just a little bit more valuable. Obviously, a 20 guy that's going to be 27 at wide receiver versus a guy that's going to be 26 at run or 27 at running back. There's better long-term future for Justin Jefferson. As far as 2026, I think Taylor's more of a difference maker. So I'd hesitate to make that deal if I was a true contender and trying to win a championship this year. I would probably want a little bit more, but in a vacuum, because Jefferson's value is so much better to teams that aren't truly contending, I actually think Jefferson's value is just a little bit better. Got a trade question coming in here from Eduardo. Won the championship this year, so I traded Marvin Harrison Jr. for a 27 early first. He was my wide receiver 4. So you're just bragging. You're bragging that you got an early 27 first. You're bragging that you won the championship. I'm really happy for you, and we allow bragging here. A+, good work, fantastic. 10-man, 1 QB league, Hall and A.J. Brown for the 101. So I don't have Jeremiah Love in the trade chart yet. I do that after we get landing spot, after we get draft capital, but I'm pretty confident that he's going to be in the Jonathan Taylor range, which is about 33 points on the trade chart. Breece Hall is right around 22. A.J. Brown's right around 19. So I would say that Hall and A.J. Brown are more valuable, but generally speaking, in 10-team leagues, the more valuable assets, the difference between them and everybody else is greater because replacement cost is higher. So it's a close deal. If I was contending, I would take the Hall and A.J. Brown side. If I wasn't, I wouldn't. See if I can find one more question here before we finish thing up. Half tight end premium, the 108 or Harold Fannin? Get out of here. FOE. No, I think I will not have Kenyon Sadiq as high as I have Harold Fannin. And Kenyon Sadiq is likely to be the 108 or the 109 or the 107. So right in that range. So I would prefer Fannin over the 108 and half tight end premium and full tight end premium and probably in non tight end premium Last question. Would you trade Jahmyr Gibbs for the rookie 101? I would not. Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, both more valuable for me for sure than Jeremiah Love. I'll probably have Achane and Genty ahead of him as well. I would expect Jeremiah Love to come in somewhere between RB5 and RB7 in the updated rankings, and he will be in those rankings in May when the draft is complete. That's going to finish it for our one-man mailbag. Thanks to Thomas for making everything work and the awesome graphics. Thank you guys for being active in the chat. We will talk to you on Friday.